In this video, we are going to see how we can access the Jupyter Notebook in the PowerAI container and try to run a notebook. We will also run additional container to see how the two containers isolate the access to the GPU resource what they have been allocated to. So containers can help you uh, uh, restrict the usage of the GPU resources to the respective containers the way you configure it. I'm going to deploy one more chart or one more PowerAI container. I'm going to name this release as iteration 2. I already have PowerAI iteration 1 release deployed. I'm going to specify the image which I want to deploy. And I'm going to pick up 1.5.4 image for this deployment. Let me also specify a port which I will use to access the Jupyter Notebook. Again, I limit the GPU allocation to this container to 1 and use host network for connectivity. So now I have two container deployments for PowerAI, iteration 1 and iteration 2. Iteration 2 is where I will enable the access to the Jupyter Notebook. So let us see how the Docker containers look like. The one which we have just started is PowerAI iteration 2, and we will use this container to access the Jupyter Notebook within this container. So we will exec into this container and start a Jupyter Notebook which will be listening on port 32762 that we had exposed when we had started this container. So you can see I have my Jupyter Notebook server running and I have the token for it, and that is listening on port 32762. Now I can use my browser to connect to this Jupyter Notebook. Since I want to access certain notebooks what I have already created, I will have to go to that directory before I start the notebook. So I will first stop this again. I have my notebook placed here, and this is where I'll start the notebook server. I can take this token and use that to validate on my desktop. As you can see, my Jupyter Notebook is accessible and I can use it to run my notebook. Here I have few notebooks available and I can access it onto the server and run it onto this container. This is an example of predicting a credit card fraudulent transaction, and this is based on the deep neural network which has been used for this credit card fraud detection. While this notebook is up here, we are going to see what is the state of other container. So I have the previous container, iteration 1 container, which is also running, and I will use that to exec into it and start some program. So what I intend to show here is that while there are two containers running different programs, they will be using their respective GPUs without affecting the other container. So here in the iteration 1 container, I am going to start a Caffe program while I run my Jupyter Notebook, which uses Tensorflow in the other container. So I will activate my Caffe environment in this container and run a Caffe test program to put the load on the GPUs. So I have started some dummy test which will put load onto my GPUs. And I can see that my GPU 0 is getting the load while my GPU 1 is still idle because it's being used for iteration 2 container. I have executed my Jupyter Notebook, and this is going to use the GPU resources as well. So while this gets executed and the training is about to start, we will see how the GPUs get used when the training is actually happening. So you can see that the training steps have initiated, and that should put some load on the GPU. So while one of the GPUs is being used by Caffe in one container, other GPU is being used by TensorFlow in other container, and both of them do not interfere with each other's execution. So if you have more number of GPUs, you can dispatch multiple parallel jobs across the GPUs using PowerAI containers.